I think there's a difference between appetite and gluttony that most people don't understand is a difference. And I think that when you watch people eat, there is definitely a difference, but the general public does not understand that.
Dr. Cooper, why is it important to understand the science of appetite?
I think it's really important because people make all kinds of judgments about themselves and others when they watch people either not eating or eating what they perceive as too much and so I think understanding the science really reduces that stigma about appetite, both directions. And then it creates more awareness, I think, for people that might not really have a normal hunger and fullness cues to understand that that's just not normal and what should they do to address that.
This is Fat Science, a podcast dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice.
I'm Dr. Emily Cooper. I've been treating patients with metabolic issues for over 25 years. I'm on a mission to raise awareness about metabolic dysfunction and why diets don't work.
Hi, I'm Andrea Taylor. I've been fat, very fat, chubby, morbidly obese, and done almost every diet ever invented. They all worked until they didn't. I've known Dr. Cooper forever, but when I became her patient and we learned metabolism was the real problem, wow, everything changed, and I've never been healthier.
And I'm Mark Wright. It's time for Fat Science.
Wait, does this podcast make me look fat?
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. Good to see you too.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, on the show, the science of appetite. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting things that we've discussed because when you think about appetite, it really is one of the more defining things in the animal world. Sometimes we feel like we could eat a horse. Other times our appetite kind of goes away and we peck at our food like birds. But what causes appetite and why is it important in our overall metabolic loop? Why don't we start there, Dr. Cooper?
Well, when I think of appetite, I think of kind of two ends of it. So I think of hunger cues that are saying, oh, got to eat something. And then the satiety, which is that sense of satisfaction after you eat. And when we're talking about satiety, it's not just a feeling in the stomach where your stomach feels like super full. It's more of a sensing in the brain that I've had enough kind of thing. And some people don't actually have normal cues going on. So they may sense hunger, but not satiety. They may feel like their stomach is like way over full, but they didn't sense anything in their brain to tell them, hey, we had enough. Or it could be the other way around. It could be that they're just never hungry and they're overfull, or they're never hungry and they're never full. So everybody kind of has a different makeup with this, but the normal would be to experience kind of at regular intervals, a sense of hunger, time to eat, and then eat something and then sort of sense in the brain, okay, we're done. I've had enough. And then have that occur throughout the day at regular intervals. That would be what's considered normal. So, a lot of people aren't on the normal spectrum, but when it comes to hunger, we have to get hungry because we literally would die if we were not hungry, if we weren't capable of being hungry. And, lots of scientists have done studies where they've kind of removed one of the most powerful, like hunger signals in the brain. It's called Agouti-related peptide, AgRP. And they've removed the capacity to produce that in rodent studies. And the rodents literally die of starvation. And it's like what the scientists are saying is if we didn't have that, we wouldn't even understand that we have to eat to stay alive. We wouldn't have any normal sense of needing to eat. We'd look at food and it would just look like a glass or something. It wouldn't be anything that we would think is palatable or that we should actually eat. And so we have to have hunger. It's just the body's way of reminding us that it's time to fuel, and our body does need fuel on a regular basis throughout the day. So there's a lot of times where it normally should kick in, but those signals are really orchestrated between a lot of different players. So that would be incoming hormone messengers, nutrient levels that are coming in from the body to the brain to inform it of our nutritional status and even our weight status. And then our brain processes that and produces other hormones and elements like insulin, triggers the production of insulin to inform our body of what it thinks. And so there's just a lot of back and forth between our body and our brain to kind of communicate and develop those hunger signals and satiety signals on a normal basis.
I feel like I'm fairly sophisticated now that I can say agouti-related peptide.
I know.
But that chemical, that AgRP, where does that come from, Dr. Cooper? And it tells our brain that
it's from the hypothalamus, it's really an area of the brain where a lot of these input signals are received. So the signals that would be received are hormones from our gut, like GLP-1, GIP, PYY, again, a lot of these signals that say, hey, we have enough food supply, or leptin, which is that hormone from our body fat that says, hey, we weigh enough, or things like ghrelin that would do the opposite and say, uh-oh, we're in a fuel shortage, our body's too hungry. Or if your blood sugar's low, say, uh-oh, we need glucose. So it's a balance of the positive signals coming in that say we're safe, we're not starving, we have enough fuel, we weigh enough, or the negative ones that say we are starving, or some kind of a weakness of the positive ones that comes in and influences that. So unless it's proven otherwise, our brain and our AgRP will be set at a high level. It'll say you're in a famine. So it's waiting for proof that you're not in a famine, from these incoming signals. And when we eat, it's normal that the positive signals should activate. And they should be released into our system and send that message to the brain to calm down that AgRP and tell it, hey, everything's okay. We have enough food. And that would reduce our hunger and start to increase our satiety.
I'm taking Manjaro and I've been on Ozempic, which definitely changes the way that I feel hunger from the way I felt hunger before I was on those drugs, which is a long time ago because I've been on those drugs for over 10 years now. And I'll know that I'm hungry, but it's way less than when I was not on those drugs. But I can tell you, I've never forgotten to have a meal. There's not a meal that I've ever said, oh, I forgot to eat. But it's definitely different from when I wasn't on those drugs. And for me, that's a healthy thing and a good thing. And my level of satisfaction after I eat is slightly different. And part of that's different because I had a gastric sleeve, so I have a much smaller stomach than I had before. But in terms of people who maybe aren't on those drugs and didn't have a gastric sleeve, it's a different deal. Like, what happens when your body signals that you're hungry? What's going on? What's the relationship between your brain and your gut? Like, what's happening?
Well, one thing to think about is before you were treated metabolically, you think about how did you feel? And how does that compare to what I was saying is normal? Normal.
Right. Like the desperation isn't there anymore. Right now, it's just like such a more calm, easygoing thing. And I just feel like I am so much more in control of everything that's going on.
And, that's the hallmark of metabolic dysfunction as the basis of obesity, because that's not normal. That's a symptom of metabolic dysfunction. If you have a desperation around food or a preoccupation with it, or your stomach is uncomfortable after you eat because your brain didn't sense anything, all of those are symptoms of underlying metabolic dysfunction. And so when you look at it, they've studied the differences in the gut hormone response to eating, for example. So when a person with a normal metabolic system eats, then what they would experience is their ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, will drop. And because it's saying, okay, you're not hungry anymore, you just ate. And at the same time, their GLP-1, which is the one that says we have enough food, that one starts to increase. And so do a whole bunch of other ones that are favorable that do the same thing. GIP, PYY, cholecystokinin is one. And so all of these favorable hormones increase that tell your brain, oh, you're eating, this is what's going on, it's registering, we've got enough food. So that's a person with a normal metabolic system. In somebody with the dysfunction, that's not what happens. And they've shown this in the science. What happens is the ghrelin does not go down as much as it should after eating. So the hunger hormone stays elevated. The GLP-1, GIP, PYY, all of that does not increase the same way as it does in somebody, with a normal metabolism. So it may be a blunted increase. And then the brain doesn't necessarily also sense it correctly. Even if it does increase, it's not sensing it correctly. So that's why scientists developed these meds. That's why they did. And they started working on these way back before the year 2000 in 1980. Yeah. So they knew way long ago that things like obesity and also diabetes are what's called a multi-metabolic and hormonal disease state, meaning there are multiple dysfunctions that are real, that are affecting not just a person's appetite, but their whole metabolic system and their whole way that they burn fuel. And so when you reintroduce those hormones, so they started thinking, how can we mimic the normal metabolic profile? So they started manufacturing these medications, starting with one, it's called amylin, which was the first one. And it's a hormone the pancreas produces when you're eating. It goes up to also help your brain see the signal from your body fat that says you have enough body fat. So it's all very complicated, but it's interesting. And so again, with people that are challenged metabolically, their amylin is not going up the way it's supposed to. So they thought, let's replace that. Then they thought, okay, let's replace the GLP-1. Let's replace the GIP. So we're kind of moving down the pathway of looking at these cocktails that can provide a normal collection of these beneficial gut hormones and pancreatic hormones to people that have this multi-metabolic hormonal disease state so that they can function more normally. So that's the thing. It's not just suppressing an appetite or changing that. It's actually restoring more of a normal metabolic feedback loop between the gut and the brain. And so it's so far beyond that, but it's a little bit different because if you think, they're not exactly like the way our hormones work because our hormones are very responsive to the meal. So they go up and down throughout the day, responding to the meal. One of the downfalls of the prescription meds we have now is they don't do that because the pharmaceutical industry really felt that people would be more open to them if they were longer acting, didn't have to be dosed every time you eat, And so now they're in the background all the time. That's not exactly the same, but at least you're getting the signal, but it's not entirely synced with the food. And so the signals are there, but what we call kinetics of how they come on and off, it's still a little bit different than someone with a quote normal metabolic profile.
That makes sense.
Good.
Like before I took medicine, I would eat like a portion, and I wasn't probably technically feeling full, but the portion was over. So, and it wasn't like I ever ate a lot. It's just the portion was over, so the meal was over. Now I just eat what I need to feel good, and it's over. And whether it's a little bit or whatever, and I feel great. Yeah. I'm like, I had a good time. I got enjoyment. I didn't have to finish everything. It's okay. And it's a very different relationship with food.
Yeah. I'm the same, Andrea. And you know that restaurant portions are generally way too big, but I'm on Ozempic, and the satiety impact from that drug on me has been really kind of pleasantly surprising. I'll eat about half of the plate
Yeah.
and I feel full and I stop and I ask for a to-go box.
We have a fridge full of leftovers.
So yeah, it's restored. Before I could, I could just eat until my pants were too tight, but it's really a pleasant change. Dr. Cooper, let's talk about when people crave different things like sweet things or salty things. Are cravings part of a normal appetite, or could that signal something's not working right?
Well, it could be either. So it's totally normal to crave something salty or sweet. That's completely normal. Where it starts being suspicious that it's not normal is if it's like in your head all the time, like, oh my gosh, I need something sweet, and now I need something else. And now you're looking at multiple servings a day of, sweets that you just keep turning to. That would kind of be a little bit of a red flag. But a lot of the time you want to weed out where that's coming from. Yes, it could be a sign of metabolic dysfunction, but it could also be a sign of just improper fueling, not having a good fueling strategy, kind of like Andrea was saying, she never forgets to eat. Well, some people don't eat regularly. And that's about the easiest way that you can fall into this trap where you start craving what are called hyperpalatable foods, which are like these super high calorically dense, high sugar, high fat foods, high salt, sugar, fat, something to just like hit those taste buds. And I think it's really a lot of the time because of just fueling errors. So, for example, I have some patients that will report that, but then you find out, well, your last meal was like 5:00 yesterday, and I'm now in an appointment with you at 11 o'clock, and you still didn't eat anything for the day yet, So that should be a clue that maybe it's people that have either a lot of food rules where they say, I shouldn't eat this. They find themselves like they can't stop eating that thing that they said they shouldn't eat. So there's people with food rules or deprivation diets where they've cut out like whole groups of like fats or carbs. They're going to crave.
Bread.
Yeah, they're just going to start craving sugars. That's normal response to that. Or if you're just disorganized and you're just not eating your breakfast, your regular meals, snacks every few hours, if you're just not on a good eating schedule or you eat in an unbalanced way, you're also going to be craving things like that. So that's the first step. Look at the nutritional makeup. But if that's already straightened out and it looks very ordered, then it could be coming from just faulty signals in the brain, either incoming signals that are off balance or the brain not perceiving them correctly. And so that is what the definition of that metabolic dysfunction is, multi-metabolic hormonal disease state that we talked about.
Okay. Can we discuss the people with the humongous jugs of water that they carry around all the time? It makes me insane. I think they're just showing off. And I mean, that they've been able to drink that much water, because actually, like, I had an appointment with you last week, and in the pre-appointment thing, it says how much water you're supposed to be drinking. And it said something about like I was supposed to be drinking my weight in ounces of water. And if that wasn't motivation for me to lose weight, I'm like, I think I got to lose weight just on that alone. I'm like, there's no way I could drink my weight in ounces of water. I have now a bigger jug of water in the fridge. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do it. And now I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be mad at the people with the jug of water walking around.
But what about those people, Dr. Cooper, that use water as a food
Right.
substitute throughout the day so that they don't feel hungry?
That's the question.
Well, no,
Sorry.
that's good. I mean, they're both good. I mean, it is important to stay hydrated, and it's half your body weight in ounces. So like if you
Oh,
so
it was
if you're
half.
200
I read it wrong.
If you're
Sorry.
200 pounds,
I
we
was
want
wrong.
you to drink 100 ounces a day. But in general,
It's still a lot.
That's
Yeah.
still a lot. Yeah.
yeah,
Still
it
a
is.
lot.
But there are people that try to fill themselves up with water to try to avoid being hungry. They're trying to squash down the hunger, and ignoring your hunger is not going to work. I mean, it's going to end up just really, really kind of backfiring. But when you do that, when you consume a huge amount of water to make your stomach feel full, there you may get some temporary increase in not so much the GLP-1, but another hormone, cholecystokinin, is another one that goes up from just like some distension. But it's not going to give you any metabolic benefit at all. And in fact, after a while, your body will be like, okay, where's the food here? And then if it's not there, it'll slow down the metabolic system. And later on, you'll find yourself again gravitating to those hyperpalatable foods and just never being satisfied.
I think that's interesting what you just said about slowing down your metabolic system, because I didn't know about that part.
Well, it's just mainly because you're just not eating. So it's the same as a diet. You know, instead of food, you're doing this water, which is you're trying to trick your body into just filling your stomach. But remember, those input signals are not just our stomach being full of water. It's what are the nutrients that are in there, our hormones responding to these nutrients that are coming in. And so without that, you're not getting the metabolic benefit of that meal, which is not a meal. It's just water.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that part.
So, Dr. Cooper, can you actually trick your brain into not feeling hungry? One of my nephews, I think, does some fasting every once in a while. And about a day into the fast, he said that he kind of had a euphoric and very clear sort of mental state come about. And he's a big fan of that. But there has to be something metabolically and chemically that's going on when we fast.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. This is an area that gets people in a lot of trouble. And
people say it all the time, though.
Well, it's true. But what's really happening, the science behind that is when you deprive yourself in any way, like cutting out the carbs or the calories or fasting, what happens is your endorphins start to increase. And endorphins are our body's own opiates. And people think, oh, good, endorphins. And that's what gives people a sense of like they're that's what that diet high is about. It's like a little sense of euphoria or being in control or that kind of nirvana feeling. But the problem is these endorphins actually are really detrimental to our metabolism. And so as they start to build up, they block the function of a very critical part of our metabolic pathway called the POMC pathway. And that part is what it does generate the endorphins, but then the endorphins shut down the production of these very beneficial hormones for our metabolism. And those beneficial hormones help maintain normal blood sugar, insulin, appetite, body weight. And so once you've done that after a while, you then could have set yourself up for a whole series of hypoglycemia, low blood sugar reactions, and very slow metabolic response. And then every time you do that and come back out of it, it really can throw some serious imbalance into the metabolic system. So what's far healthier is to stay on a consistent plan. Don't go through these deprivation periods and then try to go back to normal and deprive and normal. That's where we see clinically some of the worst effects. And it translates back to the same studies that are shown with people who do like the weight cycling diets that are in the normal weight range. So this may not be someone like your nephew might not be losing weight when this is happening, but he's still going to be getting the same detrimental metabolic impact that people who do that are getting, where they show that the visceral fat over time starts to build up, the fat around your organs, and your metabolic system shuts down. And there's big diet backlashes, big kind of deprivation backlashes that can happen with increasing your body weight. And again, the instability of your blood sugar and insulin after you eat can start throwing your blood sugar off after you've done that. So once in a while, and some people do these fasts for religious reasons too, and that's been well studied. I think we don't recommend fasting at all or promote that at all because of the risk that it poses to the metabolic system.
So, Dr. Cooper, we've talked about you can't really trick your brain like with diet soda, because if it's expecting something, it expects to get it. And if it doesn't, your brain isn't happy.
That's right.
So there's actually a study that you told us about that involved milkshakes that really proved that.
Yeah,
right?
This one, I thought it was like the best, most interesting study because what they did, the researchers created this milkshake, and it was just like a normal milkshake, it probably had ice cream or something in it. And then they told the participants, the study subjects, that they told some of them that it was a low calorie sensible shake. That's the terminology they used. So some of the study participants were told it was a low calorie sensible shake. And the other participants were told that it was an indulgent shake. So based on what they were told, they saw differences in how their body physiologically reacted to the milkshake, even though it was the same milkshake. So they measured the ghrelin levels, which are the hunger hormone, again, that's produced by our stomach, before and after the milkshake. And remember, when you consume something, the ghrelin is supposed to drop. And the people that were told that it was a low calorie sensible shake, their ghrelin levels did not drop after they ate it. So just the perception that they were depriving themselves prevented that hunger hormone from dropping. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's the brain over the body.
Yeah. If they thought it was the indulgent shake, the ghrelin, the hunger hormone, dropped and got out of the way when they ate it. But if they thought it was like a diet thing, they were already panicking that they were being put on a diet, basically, subconsciously. And the ghrelin stayed elevated, saying, you're starving, even though they just ate that. So that's the other.
Right. Have a
so
sandwich.
Think about all the people that are on diets, though. All these people are on diets and they're aware they're on a diet, and they're actually maybe consuming low calorie foods. But this one showed that even if the food's not low calorie and you think you're on a diet, you're going to negatively affect your metabolism. Even just thinking that once, your ghrelin will not drop. And that means that with it being elevated, your brain and that agouti-related peptide is going to still say you're in a famine. And so it's going to impair your satiety. It's going to slow down your metabolism. So simultaneously, you're going to have all this dysfunction occurring.
It's like when you were a kid, Andrea, you said the whole family would go on these diets, right?
Oh, we would all, because my mother was like, I'm not cooking 2 meals. You're all going to be on this. So we all did.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I always thought, we formed the Diabesity Institute, our nonprofit, long ago. And my goal originally, I thought, if we could just convince people not to go on these diets, we'll make a big difference in the health of people. And, if we only could do that. And so here we are today, trying to continue to educate people about why these deprivation strategies really are not a good idea.
It's so funny to me because so many times, I am one of the people who still watches normal television, and I'll see a doctor on TV and they go, well, diets don't work, but here's my diet. And, and I'm like, all right, so you got half of it right, but then they present their book with a
Yes.
diet, and it just makes me laugh sort of every time.
Well, when Andrea and I first got together to try to discuss this topic, that's kind of what I was telling Andrea. This was way back in 2011 or something. And I was reading to her my frustration with these textbooks, because that's basically what they were saying in the textbook. This is this behavioral strategy. This is what it's called. But there's no research that says that it actually works to change anyone's weight or any health.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, why do they write that?
Andrea was like, what? Why is this happening?
I was like, I see why you're
Yes,
angry. I
you could
see why you're
understand why I
angry.
was angry.
I'm like, okay, but how do we talk about it and not sound like horrible
Yes.
people?
So I guess as we wrap things up, Dr. Cooper, I'd love to talk. That is funny. I'd love to talk about how we should perceive our appetite, because I guess what I've heard you say in the past half hour is that if we wait until we're thirsty before we drink water, that's too late. Can we say the same about food? If we wait until we're really hungry, it might be too late. I mean, what's the appropriate way that we should view appetite?
I think It's an individual thing because some people have super reliable hunger cues that are like just on time. They're not extreme. It's just like, oh yeah, what am I going to eat right now? And if you have that internal clock, that's fantastic. But if you don't, or if you're on any medication that impairs your appetite a little, it's really beneficial to just have regular times that you eat or regular intervals throughout the day. And I like people to just have breakfast right away when they wake up as soon as they can, and then just start the clock there. And every few hours, alternate meals and snacks throughout the day. And so that would be called mechanical eating. And it might be that you're just never hungry because you're on that schedule. Or it might be that it's time. Sometimes doing that trains your hunger to line up with those times. And you may find, oh yeah, it's time to eat. If a lot of people are busy working and they get the hunger cues, but they drown it out because they just say, wait, I just have to get this done or that done. And then by the time they finish what they're doing, they're no longer getting those cues. And then that's really dangerous to be suppressing those hunger cues. So, I think if you're on a consistent, what we call mechanical eating plan, where you're on a schedule and then you're hungry beyond that, just eat beyond that too. Don't deprive yourself. But some people, as I say, some people are in that normal spectrum. They just have reliable cues and they're on a good track. But if you're somebody who's like busy at work, or you're easily distracted with all this other stuff, or you're on medicine that impairs your appetite, or you have metabolic dysfunction, it's better to be on that. And it's kind of like the Olympic Training Center always says, never get hungry, never get thirsty to their athletes. We're not all Olympic athletes, but it still benefits us to be on that type of a regimen.
Is there like a go-to snack if you're just super pressed for time and you just need to get something in your body? What would be like a little go-to snack that would be fast?
I'm not a dietitian, so I don't have the best ideas, but I know what I normally do. And I look for, you could look for things that are semi-balanced. So it's not just something like it's only going to make you satisfied for 20 minutes, So maybe trail mix is a good one because it's got a mixture of stuff, fats, protein, and carbs in there. And you can even make your own trail mix and throw whatever you want in that little gorp, as they call it. So that can be good because a handful of that can go a long way. And sometimes like energy bars are not bad, if they're just like nuts and fruit or whatever, granola bars, things like that can be helpful. Crackers and cheese, something where it's a little bit more substantial than just, some people tell me, oh, I had a handful of nuts, but then I think, well, you need some carbs too. So throw some dried fruit in that, or crackers or something, pretzels. So just trying to get a mixture of things. I think the important thing is that everyone feels good with their own foods. Like figure out the foods that make you feel good and that are easy and not so complicated to try to prepare. There's nothing wrong with having some things that are convenient while avoiding all the chemical additives that we talked about.
Little sandwiches.
Oh, that's
are
good.
Always good, like peanut butter and jelly, or cheese and cucumber sandwich, like quick crust cut off.
That's what you.
But honestly, like those little things that you can just like take in the car, because I'm always in the car driving, so like a little sandwich is always good.
Yeah, PB&J is great.
It's my favorite sandwich.
Yeah, that's awesome. Andrea, any final thoughts as we wrap things up?
Never miss a meal.
I think there's wisdom. There is wisdom
advice
in that.
Never miss a meal.
Dr. Cooper, what about you?
Yeah, I think I agree with Andrea. Just prioritize our nutrition and try to stick with what we call ordered eating. If you sense that you're in that abnormal appetite picture with either hunger cues that aren't working, or preoccupation with food, or not feeling satiety signals in your brain, then think about it. Is this a metabolic disorder, or is this because of the way that I'm fueling my body? Can I do something different? Try a different fueling strategy for a while. And if that's not solving it, talk to your doctor about whether you might have an underlying metabolic disorder.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who just get up and get going in the morning, didn't have time for breakfast, and by the time they know it, it's like 7 hours
And they may
later.
have done a workout too.
Right.
Yeah, true.
Not a good idea.
All right. Well, this has been fun. The science of appetite. This has been another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.
I'm Mark Wright. Thanks for listening to Fat Science with Dr. Emily Cooper, a Work P2P production. New episodes drop every Monday. If you've enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. This production is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. Join us next week for another episode dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.